Welcome back, Las Vegas. I'm sitting here with Daniel Blue. He is the owner of Quest Education and also a podcaster. He is a co-host of How Winners Win podcast and an author of Blueprint to Your Best Retirement. His business, Quest Education, helps entrepreneurs obtain capital for their companies, pay off high interest debt, and make money tax-free using a self-directed IRA. A pure entrepreneur. So Daniel, thank you for being here.
Jake, thank you for having me, man. I love your setup. This is a really cool thing that you have going on here.
Thank you. I always admire talking with podcasters. It's almost like a sense of like relief because I'm like, okay, they know how to communicate. I don't have to force conversation, but then we could go on tangents and then come back and just kind of trickle around everything that we need to.
Yeah, I won't be boring as shit.
Yeah, no kidding. We could just start off right at the beginning. I think that's an easy starting point. Give everyone just a description of who Daniel Blue is.
Yeah, where I always like to start is 18. When I was 18 years old, right? You know, we think about 18, being an adult, you know, maybe moving out of your parents' house, right? For me, there's three things that happened when I was 18 years old. One, I actually got a woman pregnant. Two, got addicted to drugs, more specifically Oxycontin. This is back in 2007. And then three, I dropped out of college. Right. So those three life-changing events all happened when I turned 18. Right. So that was a really big moment for me. That was really when I started to make a ton of mistakes. I started touching the stove a whole lot, getting burned, going back to that hot stove, getting burned. But like many of the guests that you probably have had on the show and people listening right now, we've all fucked up. Right? Like we've all made huge mistakes. Maybe we've hurt ourselves. Maybe we've hurt other people. Whatever it is, there is some kind of mistake, some kind of tragedy, some kind of adversity you faced. And you might not see it in that moment, but when you overcome it, you look back and you're like, shit, like I'm glad I went through that. Right? Like I've been clean for over 10 years. I stopped counting because I'm 32 years old. I stopped using when I was about 20 years old. My daughter's 12. I wouldn't have changed any of that from the past. Right. So, I like to say entrepreneurs, we like to take that path that's, less appealing. That's the not the easiest way. We like to kind of be knuckleheads and make shit harder than it should be, but that's part of our growth, right?
Yeah, it seems that entrepreneurs or many have similar drug addiction issues. We have a few things in common, actually. Well, first, as entrepreneurs, our risk-on profile is very high. We love to be very aggressive in everything that we do. I also briefly had a 3-year stint of sobriety from drinking too much and going out partying and getting caught up in the nightlife scene out here, doing drugs. Mine was more party drugs, more like cocaine and MDMA and things like that. But it just led to a cascading barrage of bad decisions to where a few friends of mine said like, hey, we believe in you. We know you're going to be successful, but like you need to stop this reckless behavior and self-destruction because it's going to not end well.
Yeah. And you have to have people like that in your life. For me, it was my mom. So if we look back and kind of peel back the layers, if you've got a fucked up situation or your own sad story, a lot of that it stemmed from our childhood, right? And for me, it was when I was 12 years old. That's when my parents got divorced. And it's not like I'm unique in that situation. You probably know someone that got divorced or your parents got divorced, right? Like that's just the world we live in. But what was different about my situation is my dad actually moved to Mexico when I was 12 years old. So there was one day I came home, had a quick conversation with my dad. He's like, hey, I'm going to go drop off your grandma in Mexico. I'll see you in a week or two. Cool. He's gone to Mexico plenty of times, always comes back. Thought nothing of it. Next thing I know, he didn't come back the next week. The next month, didn't come back. 6 months later, didn't come back. Never came back. And I didn't get a lot of answers until I was much older. So when I'm 12, 13 years old, my parents are divorced. My dad just moved to Mexico. I was really tight with them. Now it's just my mom and I. And I'm like, fuck, like, am I the reason my parents got divorced? Right? I start beating myself up. So then I start surrounding myself with the wrong people. I don't have a father figure in my life. So I start looking at other people, right? And just having bad influences. So I didn't really have a whole lot of people in my life to come in and say, hey, you're fucking up. Yes, I had, a brother and a sister and a mom that were amazing grandparents, but they're busy doing their own shit, and I'm busy in school, middle school, high school. But to your point, like you have to have people in your life that are willing to call you on your shit. And if you don't surround yourself with people like that, make it a point to make that happen. And, now I've got, amazing mentors, great entrepreneur friends where we can be direct with each other. But, I remember like it was yesterday, my daughter was born. I was 19 years old. I was so fucked up on Oxycontin that I wasn't even at the hospital when she was born. I didn't even see her the next day. I didn't even see her a week after she was born. And it wasn't until my mom sat me down and she's just like, look, son, if you don't step up and be a dad, like I'm going to fucking disown you. And like that shit hit different. Like when my mom told me that, like that's when I knew like shit, like my mom's my superhero. Like she's my rock, right? Like she raised me from 12 years old and on. So, just like your friends called you out in your shit, I was lucky enough to have my mom do that when I was 19 years old.
With having that kind of impact where your mom basically sat you down and said like, hey, we're not going to be family anymore if you continue this. Did you have an easy time overcoming this addiction, or was it a struggle to find sobriety?
It was a struggle because a lot of people end up using drugs on a regular basis because they're masking something, right? They haven't forgiven somebody. They haven't forgiven themselves. They haven't faced their demons, right? And I ended up using a lot of drugs, more specifically Oxycontin, which for those that don't know, Oxycontin is essentially heroin in the form of a pill. So it's super addicting, right? So once you start using it, if you don't use it on a daily basis, you start getting sick. Like you literally start throwing up, right? So it's no joke. But a big reason why I started to use it was because I never came at peace with my dad. I looked at my dad just left me, and like I was the reason why they got divorced. And like really, if you peel back all the layers, I was just being a little bitch. I was just being a victim, like poor me, right? And it finally got to a point where, and I tried to get clean, like time after time. I mean, I probably tried to get clean 10 times. And for people that are trying to get clean off of heroin or Oxycontin, they essentially give you pills to get off of a pill. Mm-hmm. So some of you guys might know what Suboxone is or methadone. Like if you or a family member are trying to get off of opiates, which is heroin or something like Oxycontin, and you go to the doctor and you're like, yo, I am fucked up. I'm addicted to opiates. Help me. They're just going to give you a pill to get off of a pill. They're going to give you a drug to get off of a drug, right? Like that's our pharmaceutical system in a nutshell, right? So, I remember they would give me Suboxone, they would give me the methadone, and I would use it for a couple days, and then life would throw a curveball at me. I'd get punched in the face. Life would hit me with adversity, and I would go back the next day and I would use. I actually had 2 seizures trying to get clean. Like, so I struggled, man. Like I tried to get clean, and the aha moment where I finally got clean, my daughter was 6 months old. This was November 2009. It was Thanksgiving Day. My mom was making turkey. My 6-month-old daughter was just chilling in her little rocking chair. And I remember I went up to my mom. I was like, yo, I'm going to go to the gas station. I'm going to go grab a Red Bull. I'll be right back. That was a lie. Like I literally got in my car, called drug dealers, and I was like, yo, I need to get some pills. I need to get some Oxycontin. No one was picking up though. All the drug dealers were eating turkey with their families, right? So I'm making all these calls. No one's picking up the phone. And after about an hour of just frantically searching, I finally got to a point where I'm like, okay, I'm not going to score. Like I'm not going to get pills today. And I remember turning my car off, putting it in park. I just sat down in my car and I finally had that honest conversation. And no matter where you are, whether you're addicted to drugs or if you're just in a really, really bad spot, for me, it was drugs. The only way you can get out of your situation is if you have that honest conversation where you're actually seeking truth and you're asking deep questions. And I started to ask for the first time ever, like, who am I? Like, I'm 19 years old. My daughter is 6 months old. If I answer who am I truthfully, like I'm a piece of shit drug addict. Like I am a terrible father. I am a terrible son. I'm a terrible friend. Like that's who I am right now. Is that who I want to be next year, 5 years, when Bella's 10 years old? And I'm asked to go to show and tell, or I'm asked to, career day. Like, is that who's going to fucking show up? Like, no, that can't be my future me. So I finally had that conversation with myself. And I immediately took action. Like the next day I started making phone calls where I had some connections, some networking relationships where I knew I can get some work here in Las Vegas. So the story I'm describing to you took place in St. George, Utah. You're probably familiar with St. George, Utah. If you're listening to this right now and you're on the East Coast and you're like, where the fuck is St. George, Utah? Google Zion National Park.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Beautiful. I mean, it is gorgeous. So if you Google Zion National Park, about an hour and a half from St. George, Utah. So that's where I got addicted to these pills. And I ended up moving from St. George to Las Vegas to get clean.
Usually it's the opposite.
Yeah.
Usually leave Vegas.
Yeah. I moved to Las Vegas, AKA Sin City, to get clean. And I've been clean since.
Wow. And there's something about sobriety, which is so obvious, but so powerful, where once you finally have that honest conversation with yourself, then you could channel your focused energy towards something productive. That's what happened to me when I became sober, is when I started my entrepreneurial journey. I started my first business with an antique store, started investing into crypto and did a few other business adventures. But you like grow this like unwillingness to give up. And I think it's because all of us as entrepreneurs, we want to provide value to society, but we go through so many ups and downs that it just makes that part, or like that rock bottom of your life, like it becomes like a superpower almost. And I've had on, I'd say maybe almost a dozen or so people on this podcast that shared the same thing that we do, where we fought addiction or we had engaged in this self-destructive behavior and now found like at least some sort of nominal success. What do you think it is about that experience that builds entrepreneurs into the people that they become today?
Yeah, I think it's confidence. You know, you look at all the greats, whether it's entrepreneurs, musicians, sports, figures, athletes, anyone that is super talented in achieving success, like they all have a superior level of confidence. And how do we get confidence? Well, we get confidence by doing the things that we say we're going to do. I had ultra low confidence when it was a Sunday night and I'm like, okay, tomorrow I'm going to stop using Oxycontin. And then I didn't do it. So I'm lying to myself, right? So every time you say you're going to do something and you don't do it, you're losing equity, right? Like you're just diminishing your worth. Right. But every time you say you're going to go to the gym at 6 a.m. in the morning or 6 o'clock at night the next day and you go, you feel amazing. Right. Or you say you're going to read 10 pages tomorrow, or you're going to start reading that audiobook, listening to that audiobook, or you're going to start writing your book, or you're going to start a podcast, whatever you say you're going to do and you do it, you immediately build confidence. And if you start doing that day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, that shit builds up. Right. So I can always, when I'm having a bad day, and we all have bad days, right? Like every entrepreneur can relate to this, right? Like one day you're like, dude, this is fucking amazing. Like I just made a shitload of money, or I just helped so many people. Like I just had so much impact. Like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And the next day you're like, bro, like, what am I doing? Like, dude, should I just quit this shit?
And that same line of thinking happens multiple times in one day, multiple times.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and when I have those days, I just always can go back to my confidence. Like, dude, I overcame drugs. And maybe you didn't overcome drugs. Maybe you overcame an abusive relationship, or you overcame poverty, or whatever adversity you overcame. Because if you're listening to this, you overcame some kind of adversity. You can always just draw back on that. Okay, I won. Like I'm a winner. Now I can't, rest my laurels on that. I can't just rely on that. I'm only as good as my last win, right? So that's why I got to keep following through with my promises. And that's where I attribute seeing some kind of results in my life. At being 32 years old, I'm just scratching the surface. I still have a long way to go, a lot more people to impact, but it's confidence. And that comes from doing the shit you say you're going to do.
You could say it's a byproduct, or confidence is a byproduct of consistency in some sense. Once you found this new energy, this new life, you're sober, your kid is probably a few years old. Which one of these entrepreneurial endeavors did you dive into first? Or even out of the ones that I mentioned, is there something previously before that was a quote unquote failed adventure that you pulled success out of?
Yeah, man. So being an entrepreneur wasn't something like I grew up wanting to do. Like I wish I had this cool ass Gary Vee story where I found golf balls, in a lake and then fucking shined them and sold them and made a lot of money. Or I think one of the stories he tells is he grabs like flowers from someone's house and then sells them, right? Like, or flips baseball cards or stuff like that. Like that wasn't me growing up. I played a lot of sports. I love to compete. So I do think some of the sports and the entrepreneurship, there's some parallels there. But like when I was 18 years old, like I didn't want to be a business owner. When I was 21 years old, I didn't think about being a business owner. I actually didn't start my company, Quest Education, until 3 years ago, right? I'm 32 years old. So it wasn't until I was 29 years old where I actually became, a quote unquote business owner, right? Employees, payroll, all that fun stuff, clients, right? But if we rewind, I was in training to become a business owner. I happened to stumble across sales. Sales was a path that I took at a young age when I was 18 years old. It started jamming on the phone. I was selling real estate coaching. And so being exposed to sales and setting appointments and closing deals and running sales teams, that was something that it still helps me now, right? Like sales isn't just, yo, give me your credit card, let me sell you this package. Sales is articulating your vision to your team. Sales is, talking to affiliate partners. Sales is negotiations. Sales is knowing when someone on your team is having a bad day and pulling them aside, and instead of saying, yo, you're fucking up, it's, hey, you seem off. Like, what's going on? Like, let's talk. Right? Like sales is listening more than you're talking. So I don't have a college degree. I own a financial company. We've got clients in all 50 states. We've got over 1,000 customers. I'm not your traditional person that comes from, a college degree, family with money, and I'm in the financial space, right? Most people in the financial space are showing up to podcasts with a suit and tie. They went to, a 4-year degree from UNLV or San Diego State or, some other, pretty good school, right? Like that wasn't me, but sales is something that I've been able to actually work on. And it's not something that really came natural to me. It was something that I actually had to work on, and I was intentional about it. And then right when I was about 24, 25 years old, I fucked up so much when I was 18, 19, 20, having a bad credit score, not being good with filing my taxes, spending more than I was making, not investing money, going back to what I said earlier, touching the stove and getting myself burnt time after time. I was 24, 25. I'm making really good money. I'm living way below my means. I'm like, yo, I'm stacking money. I'm investing money. I'm saving money. Like, why can't I start my own business? I know how to lead people. Why can't I be the captain of my own ship? So that's when I started to think like, man, there's other levels to this. And being an entrepreneur and competing, like that's what I want to do.
Yeah, just the unwillingness to give up. Tell us a little bit about Quest Education. I mentioned earlier that you're helping entrepreneurs obtain capital for companies, paying off interest, yada, 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 financial terms. Do you target younger entrepreneurs? Is it older entrepreneurs in your clients? And obtaining capital can come in dozens of forms. Is there a primary source that you go to help entrepreneurs obtain capital?
Yeah. So the main problem that we solve in the market is helping people access money in their retirement accounts, penalty and tax-free. So if you have a 401k or an IRA and you want to pull that money out for whatever reason, maybe you want to buy crypto, maybe you want to use it to start a business, you're probably going to end up paying 20 to 40% in penalties and taxes to the IRS. That's a big problem. Right. So we solve that problem in the marketplace. We teach people how to access their own 401ks, IRAs, penalty and tax-free, and they can use that money however they want. I've got a customer here in town. She actually used to run the Great Clips. I'm sure you passed by Great Clips, right? She did that for decades, got sick and tired of being on her feet all day. And she's like, man, I want to start my own business. I want to have my own online business. And if I can have a income stream consistent enough through my own business, I can quit Great Clips. So she needed some funds to start that online business. She happened to have an IRA at the time, if I remember correctly. She went to her financial advisor. She's like, hey, I want to pull some of this money out. I need like $20,000 to start my business. Financial advisor's like, no, I don't think you should do that. If you do, you're going to pay a bunch of penalties and taxes. So she ends up talking to us and we're like, hey, did you know that you can actually take that IRA money and get it converted into what's called a solo 401k? And from the solo 401k, you can actually take out that $20,000 penalty and tax free, use it to start your business. So this is years ago. Fast forward now, she's no longer working at Great Clips. Her business is making enough money where she's working from home, and she was able to use her retirement account to fund part of her business. So you could use the money in a lot of different ways. They can even invest in crypto if they want.
So why do you think the the process to pull capital out of 401k is so ambiguous and vague?
Math. So if you have an IRA or 401k right now, and it's held by a traditional Wall Street company, more than likely you're paying 1% to 2% a year in fees, right? Let's do the math. There's trillions of dollars in IRAs and 401ks. 1% to 2% a year, it's a lot of money these big Wall Street companies are making. The less money that they're managing, the less fees they're making. Their income drops. So why would they want to teach you how to use money in your retirement account to invest into crypto, to invest into a real estate, project, a flip, a rental house, invest in your own business, pay off 20% interest rate credit card debt? Like, they're not making money off those transactions. So one, they're not educated because they're getting their licenses and their series, 6 and 7 licenses. And one thing I want to be very clear, like, I'm not a financial advisor. Like, I'm not here to sell investments. We just provide education and provide people an opportunity to really understand what's out there. And it just happens that these financial advisors and these CPAs aren't teaching these people what really exists. And going back to my point earlier, a lot of the times they're not trained, when they're going through their credentials. Or once they are aware of this, they're like, yeah, why are we going to teach someone about a self-directed retirement account, like a solo 401k, to give them more freedom with their money? We'd rather have their money housed here to sell them products that benefit us.
Doesn't it seem so crony at times that these corporations and big businesses take your money in, charge you, and then try to maintain it in their own vault so that they can profit off of it while you kind of just wander around trying to survive off of breadcrumbs from your regular wage job?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it just comes down to knowledge, right? We only know what we don't know, right? So a lot of the things that I've just talked to you about, you might be listening to this right now and you're like, dude, I didn't know I can access money in my retirement account. I didn't know that. Well, I mean, you didn't know that, right? So it does come down to just being willing to take action and listen to a podcast to extract a nugget or two. Good old YouTube University has a bunch of content, right? Like, so we are in a day and age where more of that information is prevalent, but like anything else, trust but verify, right? Like, you can always Google solo 401k. This is an IRS approved retirement account that exists. It's a legitimate plan. You do have to be an entrepreneur, with no W-2 employees with your business. So not everyone qualifies for this, but a lot of people in Las Vegas or any other city, if they're a realtor and they get 1099 commission, if they're a freelancer, consultant, have an online business, there's a lot of different ways to call yourself, quote unquote, an entrepreneur with no W-2 employees. But it just goes back to the school system, Jake. I mean, I didn't learn about any of this stuff in high school, right? They should be teaching kids about mental health, credit scores, how a mortgage works, right? Like principal, interest, 30-year loan, equity. They don't teach people this. And there's ultimately an agenda at the end of the day. And we could probably have a whole separate podcast on why they're not teaching kids this. But those are just facts. And all we can do as parents or future parents, or even someone that is an influential figure in your family, make sure your nephews, your cousins, your kids, your family members know about some of this shit. So in that way you can make an impact and there's a ripple effect.
Financial literacy seems to be a massive pain point within just the overall global population, but I'm seeing more entrepreneurs focus on it because I think it's become a little bit glaringly obvious that it is not taught well through the schools because of the disintegrating middle class and poverty is becoming more prevalent across the country. Are there any other, I won't call them loopholes, but are there any other avenues for entrepreneurs to obtain capital in this sort of way of a self-hosted IRA? Like, is there anything else, a similar, like a procedure that is overlooked or that these Wall Street institutions try to keep secrecy in the dark?
Yeah, there's some really cool insurance products. You can Google infinite banking, be your own bank. I'm not here to say I'm an expert in everything. I'm definitely not an expert in infinite banking, but there's some really cool insurance policies where you actually can borrow money from the plan and do some cool stuff with it. I'll let people in that arena speak more intelligently about that. But when it comes to, a 401k from an old job or an IRA, you technically can move that into a solo 401k. It can't be an IRA. So an IRA, you can't pull money out penalty and tax free and invest in your own business or pay off high interest rate credit card debt. You can use a self-directed IRA in some instances to invest into crypto, like your actual retirement account owns Bitcoin, for example. And that's something that a lot of people, I know you're really savvy in crypto, that a lot of people need to be aware of. And as well as anyone else, there's a lot of velocity, a lot of buying and selling with these crypto investments. And there's a lot of taxable events that get triggered. So imagine having $50,000 in a self-directed IRA or a solo 401k, and it owns crypto. If that 50,000 grew to 100,000 and you sold that position, if it's within a retirement account, there's no taxable event created. So now your 50 grew to 100, you sold it. Now your 100,000 is cash. You can take that 100,000 and redeploy it and buy more crypto. And you can do that all day long and never have to create a taxable event in a lot of cases. So I will say, the reason why I use the word a lot of cases is if you have decent income coming through your business and you are an entrepreneur, you definitely should look into a Roth solo 401k. I know a lot of people don't talk about this strategy, and I'm going to keep it quick. You can contribute up to $58,000 a year of new money into a Roth solo 401k. That number, the 58K, is dependent on how profitable your business is. Right. So you do have to keep in mind, that sentence. But let's just say you've got a profitable business. It's making enough money to be able to justify sticking the $58,000 into your company's solo 401k. If it's a Roth solo 401k, Jake, and they stuck in $50,000, they're going to pay taxes on that 50K. It's still taxable income. Mm-hmm. However, if that 50,000 grew to $1 million over a period of time, let's just say, that $1 million is 100% tax-free. Jeez. So they pay taxes on the seed, the 50K, but the harvest, which is the million, is 100% tax-free. So there's some really cool things, that people can do in the self-directed arena. And that's what we take pride on, is just being able to pull the curtain back and just be like, hey, did you know that this exists? Did you know that you could do this? Did you know that this is happening over here? And then basically seeing where it fits in and hopefully solving a problem with someone, whether that problem is high interest rate credit card debt. Maybe they need funding to start their business. Maybe they're leery about the stock market and they'd like to have alternative assets in their retirement accounts like crypto, precious metals, real estate. So basically it's a matter of, hey, let's see where you're at and how we can help you.
You're a very knowledgeable man, I have to say. You're also somebody who is working with entrepreneurs regularly and an entrepreneur yourself. How do you distribute this education? Your company is called Quest Education. Do you, outside of working with entrepreneurs one-on-one as clients, do you have any other mediums that you exchange or share information through?
Yeah, so we've had to evolve, and by no means have we gone through this without challenges. We've done a pretty bad job with personal branding, and we being me, right? Like I call the shots. I own this company, right? So if we're doing shitty in an area, that falls on me. So if we rewind this, we've had some pretty good success with affiliates. Big reason why we've been able to have over 1,000 customers that we've been able to help set up solo 401ks and some self-directed IRAs. We have affiliates in the tax and accounting space. We have affiliates in the business funding space. Maybe they're dealing with clients, helping them get funding for their startup. So they'll refer that for us, some of their leads, their clients, right? So, we've done an okay job at establishing different referral partnerships, different affiliates that send us leads, right? However, one thing that we've had to be a lot more intentional about over the last year or two is personal branding, like getting the word out, right? If you and I would have done this interview last year, I wouldn't have had a book come out, right? I had a book come out 3 weeks ago. It hit Amazon bestseller, right? Like that book was not here last year. I didn't even finish the book last year. I didn't have a course last year, right? I wasn't really active on social media. Maybe you can relate to this, whoever's listening, in the sense of, I really don't like social media. Like if I wasn't an entrepreneur, I would not be on social media. Like it's just real talk. However, if you're an entrepreneur and you're selling a service or a product, you need attention. And social media is an avenue to get attention. So I'm using social media as a tool to get attention in a good way, not buy my shit. Like if you go to my Facebook or my Instagram, you're not going to see a whole lot of buy my shit. Like I'm trying to add value and share what I'm going through and hopefully being able to help people along the way. So then down the road, maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's a year. If a retirement account question comes to mind, maybe they think of me, right? So social media is a long game. So, my goal is to eventually have us have, different platforms, right? We've got business coming in through the book, business coming in through social media, business coming in from, me speaking, business coming in from the course, business still coming in from affiliates. And as an entrepreneur, you can't rely on just one way to get leads. Like if your only leads that come in are from referrals, you're now relying on, you're relying on other people to feed you. What happens if that affiliate, that referral source goes out of business? What happens if their marketing strategy goes to shit?
Smart. It's just like being an entrepreneur. They say you want to have multiple streams of income. You want to have multiple streams of leads when you're in the sales business. Your book is fresh. It's 3 weeks off of being released. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, man, that definitely fucked with my confidence in the sense of I started writing this book in July of 2019, and I got a lot of it done. I say a lot, but I got probably 50% of it done. And then one thing happened after the other, right? Like this fire I had to put out, that fire I had to put out, got put to the back burner. And then COVID happens, right? So it was just excuse after excuse. And, oh man, I'm going to finish it next week. Oh man, I'm going to finish it next month. And I just never was able to finish it. And I just got done telling you, when you keep a promise that you make to yourself, your confidence goes through the roof. If you make a promise and you don't keep that promise, it takes away, it chips away equity. It chips away that self-worth. So, it felt really good, Jake, to finally finish that book this year. What it really took for me to actually finish it. I don't know if you've heard of the program 75 Hard.
Yes. Yeah. My friend Travis Chappell was doing it.
Yeah.
While actually he was on it when I interviewed him last year at the time.
Yeah, it's funny, man. We were going through kind of some of the same things together at the gym, like 5 a.m. at Lifetime. Like, fuck, bro, I'm so tired. But yeah, man, like when I was doing that program, I finally was just like, okay, like I need to stop making excuses. Like I just need to make this happen. So finally blocked off my calendar. Everything else was not a priority, and I just busted out that book. And it felt good in the sense of, I'm glad that it took longer than I wanted it to take. I mean, because if you wrote a book, if you're listening to this right now and you wrote a book, you probably didn't take 2 years, maybe 6 months, a year, but maybe you're like me and you took a long time, or maybe you haven't started your book already. It's okay. Like you can still get started, and everything happens for a reason. I've been able to accumulate a lot more knowledge over the last 2 years. Plus my strategy has been a lot more clear. Like my book is for anyone between the ages of, ideally between 30 and 50. If you have an existing 401k or an IRA, you can pick up that book. It's only like 100 pages, and I dumbed it down. Like I strategically did not use fancy words. Like I could sit here and bore you to death with all this financial lingo, right? But I'm not going to do that in the book. Like I want it to be super easy for you to connect the dots, get done reading it, and then immediately take action, or at least have tactical information to make tweaks and make changes and take action. So that was the goal of the book.
It's to make tweaks to your own financial literacy.
Yeah. So like those two strategies I talked to you about just barely. One, how to access a retirement penalty and tax-free and use it to fund a business or invest in crypto or, pay off high interest rate credit card debt. I go in depth on how that works. And then another strategy I go in depth about is that whole Roth solo 401k and being able to pay taxes on just the seed, but not the harvest, and have a good chunk of money in a tax-free bucket. Because who doesn't love tax-free money, right?
You kidding me? Yeah. Taxes stuffed, right? That's what we say in the crypto world. When you write a book, it's there's like this sense of accomplishment. It's almost like a sense of like notoriety. It's like, because writing a book, it's just you there at the desk for months or years, as you mentioned, and you hit those writer block walls, or life takes over and you can't write in the book for a month. And a lot of people, even me, myself, I tried writing a book multiple times and life just took over and I wasn't able to, but it still circulates in the back of my mind constantly whenever I'm doing something. It's like, you should start writing that book again. You should start writing it again. Did you feel a sense of accomplishment or satisfaction after you completed it?
My confidence went up just because, again, just back to the basics, right? I said I was going to do something and I did it. And that could be freaking anything. Like, it doesn't have to be a book. And if you want to write a book, one piece of advice is I would literally get a hotel room somewhere else in a different city, preferably. If it's the same city, go on the other side of town, but just go to like a random hotel with not a lot of distractions and just freaking be in there for a couple days and have no distractions and just bust that shit out. Because what will happen for me personally, I would block off times, right? Like, all right, cool. Monday between 4 and 5, I'm going to finish editing or I'm going to do a chapter. And dude, like just something would come up, So if you break it up in a long process like that, just it's easier to get distracted. Whereas, when I finally got done, I just went into my office from Sunday from like 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. No distractions. None of my employees were there. No one's calling me. I'm not checking my email. I'm not checking my social media. It's just me and freaking Microsoft Word. And I wish I had done more of that in the early stages.
Throughout this growth process between building out Quest Education and writing your book, Blueprint to Your Best Retirement, did you have a team behind you? Did you have a team supporting you? Was this a whole solo entrepreneur experience?
Yeah, man. So like team, Quest Education, I've got about 13 employees. They're all here in Las Vegas. Probably half of them are at the office. The other half work around town from the homes, remote. We had to make that, that change. We had to adapt post-COVID, right? So I realized I'm like, okay, a lot of my staff wants to work from home and we can still hold them accountable and they're kicking ass. Like, let's do it. Let's rock a remote workforce. And so we've been doing a hybrid that's been working out good. So I'm super blessed to have, rock stars as far as, employees, with my company. So that's one set of help I have. And then I'm a part of a couple masterminds, a couple entrepreneurship groups. I'm in Ryan Stewman's mastermind. So I go to Texas once a month. There's about 100 of us. And that's been awesome. Like just being in a room full of people that are investing thousands of dollars into themselves. And they're making a commitment to get on a plane and fly from Virginia, fly from Texas, wherever in Texas, or fly from Washington State or Las Vegas and fly into Dallas, Texas, and spend a day. And there's just been some really good relationships that I've been able to develop over the years there. And they've been really instrumental in helping me with my book as well. And then, I did hire an editor. You can definitely have a book done on your own. For me, like I was just really worried about, like when I thought about writing a book, Jake, I thought about me sitting down with like a candle burning and then like a shitload of like paper in front of me and like grabbing the pen and like putting it in ink and then just like writing shit and then it not looking good and then grabbing the piece of paper and putting it in the ball and then throwing it in a trash can and missing it, right? Like that's how I pictured it. So I hired, her name is Hillary, and shout out to Hillary. She's awesome. So I hired her. And so she was one to walk me through this. And I downloaded the app Rev. I took a couple drives to California and I'm just literally talking to Rev chapter by chapter. So I take the transcripts, send it to her, do the, voice to text, send it to her. And then she takes that information, takes my vomit and makes it look a lot more structured. And then where I got stuck and where you might get stuck too is when she sends you or they send you the updated version. I had this Microsoft document with like 100 plus pages and it just had a shitload of edits. Like, hey, you need to add a story here. Hey, I'm not sure what this sentence means. Reword it. Hey, like just all of these different, tweaks I need to make. So I opened up that Word document one day. This was in July 2019. I opened that shit up. I looked at all the work I had to do. I was like, yeah, I'll get to this later. And, that was why it took 2 years. I just ran from it.
A few of my friends who've got to that exact part of the book writing process have mentioned that it's like a gut check.
Yeah.
you feel vulnerable because they basically just ripped your mind apart and said like you're wrong in all of these other aspects, and you feel like a sense of like resent against the editor, but they're just doing their job objectively. So you just have to be consistent and just get back to it. And it's similar to how I edit my own podcast and if you've edited your own podcast, you probably have the same experience where you're watching yourself talk and you're like, man, I messed up here. I paused here. I used the wrong grammar here. I omitted a word here. But you have to look at it as like it's somebody else, and you have to just be very fair with yourself and not just not possess this like self-deprecating mentality that is going to eventually bring you down.
Yeah. For me, it wasn't so much of how dare you criticize me. For me, it was, dude, this is a bunch of busy work. Like this is a bunch of little stuff I have to do. And I should have done a better job of looking at the big picture, like this busy work, because one mistake I made early on was just not delegating enough early on in my time. And now I'm at a point now where I try to delegate as much as I can. I don't want to be the bottleneck in my business, right? Like I want to delegate my team so then that way they can grow and I can empower them to make a lot of decisions. They're going to make mistakes. Let's learn from it. And then I can focus on higher ROI activities for my business, right? I want to focus more on growing my business, working on my business, and not being in my business, right? So I should have done a better job of equating, hey, all this busy work that I'm saying that this book requires, the big picture is I can get this book out to the public and I can get more attention and I can help people and I can change their lives by giving them information, and it's going to be a big game changer. I knew that, but I didn't do enough of saying it out loud for me to buy into that. So I just looked at it as like, dude, I'd rather just outsource this shit. Like I'd rather just get someone off Fiverr or just someone on my team to go through it, but only I can do that, and it even got to the very end where I had to pick like the book cover and the font. And I'm like, dude, like this is just such small little details, but the details matter, So just a matter of just being more intentional and being more focused on understanding that, okay, there's going to be some stuff in the details that you have to do, some things that you can't delegate because this is your brand, this is your book. So, that's a challenge as well, is knowing what to delegate and what not to delegate, when to do that.
You are exactly right. That is a pain point that I've discussed and had a conversation with multiple entrepreneurs about. When you finally have to delegate away specific tasks of this business or this child that you groomed for years and months and put all this hard work and tears to build this system that you have, and then to delegate it away and know that it might not be up to the exact par that you do, and that you're going to have to work with someone to get there. It feels like you're like giving away a piece of you. And a lot of entrepreneurs don't ever get to that process. They just stay a cog in the machine, and they become more of just like an active manager than a leader and a visionary who's looking out on the forefront to see what direction they have to take the team. And you can't do that when you're doing the everyday tasks of a business. You have to be able to automate it away and trust in some of the team members that you hired, right? Like at the end of the day, you're the one sitting there hiring, you're interviewing them. You decided that they're perfect for you. Did you feel anything similar of that nature when you got to the scaling process?
Yeah. I mean, it's really easy to want to hire people just like you, right? Like naturally it's, oh, okay. Like we get along, we like the same things, we think the same, like you're hired, right? But you have to get to a point, once you've gone through enough hiring and firing people, you have to bring in people with different skill sets that think differently, that can challenge you, because you're not always right. Think about it. As an entrepreneur, you're making thousands of decisions. You're making a lot of decisions before lunch, right? You're not always right on those decisions. And a lot of times you have to make the decision without knowing all the facts. It helps to have people on the front lines, people with a different perspective, to give you feedback. And it really, really is important to make sure that those people buy in. And this goes back to sales. Like you have to explain your vision to your team. Like, does your team know the mission? Do they know the core values? Does your team know why we do what we do? Like, does your team know where you want to take this company? And if you could be super clear in that, like I get challenged all the time, You know, like a lot of my managers, they'll say like, dude, you're wrong. Like, okay, help me understand. Right. Like that's okay. You know, so when people have a hard time delegating and usually it's because they don't want to relinquish control. And it's because I've been there. It's like, fuck, like I don't want to have him get on the phones and sell. Because when I first started, you know, this business, I was constantly on the phones, right? Like I'm focusing on selling, I'm onboarding clients, right? Now these days I'm not on the phones as much, right? I'm doing a podcast with you at 4:00, you know, in the middle of the week, right? While my team is doing what they do. But in the beginning, I'm like, dude, like if I have them do this, like they're going to mess it up. And they are. Like, but that's how you get better, by making mistakes and then looking at the film with your employee, with your team member and say, hey, this is where you messed up and this is what you need to do better. Right. And as long as they know the mission and they want to win just like you want to win, they're going to take constructive feedback and they're going to make adjustments. Right. So you have to be willing to have those temporary strategic setbacks in order to move forward. And I always tell people that, you know, tell me about delegating, like it's so hard, like I don't know if I want to do it. Dude, you can only go so far by yourself, right? Yep. If you want to just have a high paying job where, yeah, you have an LLC, you have CEO, an entrepreneur in your bio, but can you be gone for a week? Can you be gone for 2 weeks and your business still makes money? Like, are you still having to sell in order to make money? Like, because if that's the case, then you don't really have a business. You have a high paying, you just created a really badass job. And that's cool. Some people are okay with that. But I know a lot of people, myself included, like I want time freedom, right? Like I want to be gone for a month and the business still is humming, is jamming. I want to go start other businesses. And Quest Education is still changing people's lives and helping people. And my employees are making good money and they're moving up, right? So you can't do that without a team. You have to have a badass squad to get you there. And you have to be willing to invest in your team, have really hard conversations with them, give them feedback, have them give you feedback, and make mistakes together and learn.
That's the fun nature of it. It's similar to one step forward or one step backwards, 2 steps forward. Or something Steve Jobs always says is that if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. That's completely the right idea. But also, I mentioned something in the very beginning that we didn't cover, so I want to cover this before we get out of here. You also host How Winners Win podcast. As I mentioned, co-host, so you have to share control of this podcast. Tell us a little bit about the goal and some of the topics of How Winners Win and the chemistry that you have with your co-host.
Yeah, so my co-host is Keita Spears. He's been actually working with me from day one. And I just wanted to have, you know, someone else to kind of shine with. I like the idea of just kind of bouncing, going back and forth and just having a real conversation, you know, and he brings a lot of skill sets. He's been a rock star employee for me for a number of years, right? So it's really cool just jamming with him. And we both have a sports background. And the idea of How Winners Win is to help people win in their life, right? And obviously we have a lot of experience in the financial side. So, you know, we could talk circles about the financial side, but we didn't want to bore people to death. Like if all we're going to do is talk about freaking crypto and self-directed retirement accounts, like we're only going to be able to help a certain amount of people. So, you know, what we talk about is how can we help you win in your personal life, your financial life, your entrepreneurial life, right? So the topics really range on what's going on in our current situation. Like, you know, last week was mental health, like dealing with stress, right? Like I was talking to people about, I just went and saw a therapist last week. Like I've been trying to go see a therapist for a minute. And maybe you're listening to this right now and you're like, fuck, like I need to go see a therapist. Dude, there's no shame in your game. Like seeing a therapist, sitting down, unpacking some of your shit, it's good to have some unbiased feedback, right? Like I'm big into mental health, right? So, you know, just ways to deal with stress. You know, we did an episode not that long ago about hiring and firing, like building a culture, you know, and then we'll sprinkle in some financial sides, you know, financial literacy and things like that. So we've been having a lot of fun with that, man. Just having just authentic conversations, nothing scripted. We'll have a topic, we'll have some guests. You know, we like to bring, you know, some badass guests that can, you know, add some value to the show and, hopefully change some lives through people listening to the podcast.
Before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about the podcast and how Travis had been trying to convince you to start a show for years, and how most podcasters generally think and sit on the idea for months to years before actually doing it. Have you seen any positive benefits since starting the show?
Yeah. So shout out to my boy, Travis Chappell. He's the podcast guru, the go-to podcast authority in the space. So yeah, man, we'd be at the gym. He's like, bro, you need to get a podcast. And it wasn't because of like, he wants me to like, spend money with him and sign up for his podcast course. Like he helps people make money with podcasts and set up podcasts. He was just being a genuine friend. Like, dude, you got a badass business. You got a lot of knowledge. Like you need to let the people know. And it just wasn't a priority for me. Like I was in the mode of building a business, and I still am in the mode of building a business. And I really wanted to make sure when I got on the podcast and I shared, I really want to make sure I could speak from intelligence, right? Like my business is 3 years old. I've got 13 employees. We do 7 figures a year. Like I feel like I don't have everything figured out, right? There's people much more successful than me, much more older, more money, better relationships, better everything, right? However, I do know I can bring some value, right? So at this stage in the game, because of my experience and what I'm going through, what I've been through, I can bring some shit to the table and help people. If I would have started my podcast a year and a half ago, I wouldn't be as wise as I am now. So I did feel like there was some of that time factor where I wanted to make sure that if I'm going to put something out there, like I'm not just winging it and making shit up and just regurgitating information, right? Like I'm actually sharing real life experiences and providing insight from my heart, like what's really happening. And I'm banking that whoever's listening is like, yo, like that's me, and we just want to be able to bring that every single week and, see where it goes from there.
Podcasting is really social leverage. At the end of the day, you're investing social capital into to your guest that's sitting across from you or your co-host. And in returns, at some time down the road, that social equity becomes redeemable in terms of lunch, business referral, investment opportunities, new relationships form, vacation. Like that's why I love podcasting so much, is because you don't know what that return is at the end of the day. Whereas you're a finance guy and you're a numbers guy, so you know what those returns are going to be. But this is a little bit more creative and unknown, and it's almost like a cheat code, because I realized that I was trying to connect with a lot of high net worth individuals or people of success, and you DM them on social media or you try to talk to them in person, and they don't really give you as much time a day. But then you tell them you have a podcast and they say, here's 3 hours of my time. And then after the conversation or before, after you have them opened up, then you could present any sort of information or any sort of business deals to them, and they're much more open, and you're more likely to land whatever that idea that you've been concocting in your mind for hours or days or years, however long you've been following them, to land that and to build something of rapport. It's almost like a cheat code to life.
Yeah, it's a great way to get in front of people, right? I mean, take someone that is an influencer or has a pretty good reputation. They're less likely to jump on a call with you to just, hey, let's connect, right? You got to love those DMs where it's like,
pick my brain.
Hey, brother, would love to connect with you. Can we jump on a call? And it's like, and talk about what? Like, like what's the agenda, right? So we all have those versus, hey man, like been following you for a while. You've got an awesome story. I think you'd bring a ton of value to my audience. I got a podcast. This is what it's called. Would you be interested in me interviewing you? Right? Like that's a completely different angle. And again, as long as you're authentic about it too, right? Like you got to make sure that you are actually consistent with what you're doing. Like there's definitely a dream 25 of people that I want on the podcast, right? But like, I know they're not going to take me seriously when I'm only, 30, 40 episodes deep, right? Like it's the long game, right? And that's entrepreneurship. Like you got to be willing to play the long game, whether it's posting on Instagram, whether it's having a podcast, whether it's writing blogs, whether it's, whatever it is within your business, like you're probably not going to see results overnight. And the problem is most people expect instant gratification to take place, those results to happen a week later, a month later, and they're going to quit. But if you're in the game year after year after year and you're consistent, like, dude, that's when like it starts to compound and you can start seeing some results.
Delayed gratification is one of the best capitalistic outputs that you could receive. To me, a crazy stat was the average podcast lifespan is only 7 episodes.
Oh shit.
Yeah, it's so I was like dumbfounded when I found that out. It's because many people, they don't want to stay consistent. They don't want to play the long game. One of our famous entrepreneurs that we've been mentioning on here, Gary V, he's probably the most widely known entrepreneur, kind of brought into the spotlight, and he actively talks about playing the long game. Recently, I was listening to a podcast and he was talking about his NFT project, VFriends. And he talked about how with his team, they were talking about a 45-year plan for his NFT project. The end of that 45 years, he'd be 90 years old. And he's said he is all aboard playing that. He definitely expects to be around that long, but to plan that and to see that far into the future and know that you have to possess that sort of patience to be able to even comprehend something like that, that's when you know that you are finding some sort of success in an entrepreneur. Because there's like a famous quote, gradually then suddenly, or everyone thinks you're an overnight success, but they don't think about those years or decades of just grueling grit and just those rock bottoms where you wanted to give up and just call it a day. Like that's the long game is something that many think about, but less do.
And no one can take that from you, right? Like it took me years to get off of pills. I played the long game, right? Like no one can take that away from me, right? There's something that you're experiencing right now that maybe you're in a funk right now and you don't see, man, a light at the end of the tunnel, right? But you're alive. If you wake up tomorrow morning and you can open up your eyes and put your 2 feet down when you get out of bed, like, bro, you have it a lot better than a lot of other people. There's people in a different country on the other side of the world that are in a refugee camp, right? They don't have running water, right? So, I know Gary Vee talks a lot about this is gratitude. Like gratitude is so important. Like that helps keep me grounded because as I'm going through days that are good and bad, I got to keep that gratitude in place because I already know like tomorrow isn't guaranteed. However, I do have to balance out, like you said, that delayed gratification because I want to make sure that the future me is going to be happy with the decisions the present me is making.
It's exactly the way to put it. Before we get out of here, I have one final question for you. Same question I ask everybody on the way out. What does Las Vegas mean to you?
Man, getting clean. I got a nonprofit called Vegas Wish, and it all started when we had season tickets to the Golden Knights. And this is, you probably remember this right after that terrible, October 1 shooting, where just so many innocent people lost their lives at that, country concert, right? And I remember me and my homies were getting together. We're like, dude, let's find a way to impact some people, So we took our season tickets to the Golden Knights and we started giving them away to first responders, to nurses, to homeless people, kids with cancer, like their families, like just random acts of kindness. And it's just snowballed, and Vegas Wish now is like we have a board and we're really growing. And where I'm going with this is on my bio for the Vegas Wish website was like, what Vegas actually means to me. And Las Vegas holds a very dear place in my heart because it's the place I came to get sober. I never thought I'd be living here for 12 years, so it's definitely a place that I hold dear in my heart. And I think a lot of people think that Las Vegas is just this shit, stripper, cocaine, terrible city. And I'm sure there's, we all know there's some darkness in this city. However, I know there's people in this city that have a bright light to shine. And it's people like that that make the city amazing.
Vegas is glad to have you. Where do I send all the listeners and the viewers on YouTube to follow you along your journey or anything else you'd like to mention?
Yeah, best place would be danielblue.me. So Daniel, Daniel, blue, just like the color. That is my real last name. It's not a fake name. So danielblue.me is the best place. That website has all my social media handles. I'm pretty active on Facebook and Instagram. You can find me at Daniel Blue. And then if you have a 401k from an old job or an IRA and you're like, dang, I didn't know I could access that money, penalty and tax-free. There's a link to my company's website, Quest Education, on the danielblue.me website. So people can head over there and maybe they want to jump on a call to speak with someone with my team. And my team would be able to educate them on what that looks like. And then a link to my podcast, How Winners Win. And then a link to my book, Blueprint to Your Best Retirement. And then you can buy that on Amazon, and then a link to my course, and then just a bunch of free content as well, articles and videos and things like that. So that's the hub of it all, danielblue.me.
Gotta love it, man. Make sure you guys subscribe, listen to his pod. I listened to 2 of his recent episodes. They were really good, very entertaining, short, concise, about 30 minutes. Love it. Daniel, thank you for coming on and sharing your time with us, your knowledge and your insight within the financial world, but also the willingness to, or unwillingness to never give up. You possess like a large amount of grit that is very admirable. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, man. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you guys for watching. We'll catch you next time.